Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Monday special edition. I'm very excited for this one. I'm a big Mission of Burma fan, as folks that caught my episode of Pete Prescott might have noticed. And through some back and forth, took a little time to get here. Very shortly, I'm going to be talking to Mr. Roger Clark Miller, Roger C. Miller. That's the Miller you're looking for. Very excited to talk to him. A great guitarist, iconic guitarist, some might say, like me. I'm the one that just said it right now. As well as composer, just a real all-around fascinating dude. And I'm looking forward to this. Hopefully you are too. But before that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that has been touring and recording for 24 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 385. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at protonicreversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will achieve that goal. And if you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around the internet, and even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show. It beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. And it's just a darn nice thing to do. So yeah, Burma, Roger Miller, iconic player and guitarist. I'm not going to bloviate any longer than I have to here. Roger Miller, welcome to the show, man. Appreciate you.
Pleasure to be here.
How often do you play guitar recreationally? Like just for the heck of it, for playing for the sake of playing?
I mean, usually every day, but not every day. I mean, it depends. Like start Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm flying with the Anvil Orchestra to play the Milwaukee Film Festival and the Roger Film Festival, and I'm not playing guitar during that time. I'll be on the airplane or playing keyboards in that group.
You're right. Both those things are not playing guitar. I did not realize they were going to be doing the Milwaukee Film Festival. I'm actually going to be going to that. So
yeah, we're playing to the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a pure improv score, and I play some cornet and some toy piano as well.
Well, that sounds lovely.
It is. It's really fun.
I learned something new today. This episode's already a success. It's happening in the town I live in. I had no idea. So that's great. But you're someone that plays regularly. You play with purpose. If you're composing, if you're recording, et cetera, but you're also, you still find joy in the act of just playing itself is what I'm driving at.
Yeah. Number one is I like it and I get something out of it.
Right. When did you actually start? Like at what age? Was it really early on or?
I started playing piano when I was 6. And then when I was in 6th grade, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. They're that very first show. Must have been 63. And after that, I wondered why I was playing piano and not playing guitar.
I feel like that's a pretty common thing for folks that saw that.
I'm
It
just
was
like every other millions of Americans.
like, what am I doing?
But I was mostly a bass player for a while. Like in 1967, the Summer of Love, I had a band with my brothers, and we were doing like Yardbirds. I was in ninth grade.
Yeah.
We're covering Yardbirds, 13th Floor Elevators.
Sure, yeah.
Trying to do Help I'm a Rock by the Mothers of Invention, Kinks, Stones, the usual suspects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trending towards psychedelic and adventures.
And did you have an idea of what you wanted to do with it, or was it more just like, wow, this is cool, I just like doing this?
I always, right away, as soon as I don't know how soon it was, but at some point I knew that I had an album's worth of material, like a really good album.
Yeah.
I had something to contribute to rock music. And that album would be Verses.
Yeah. That's
many years later.
Yeah, I heard of it. It's good.
Yeah. I read about it once.
Yeah, and so that's something where I feel like you have kind of a unique voice in guitar, and I feel like there's usually two paths for that. There's just like the weird savant that came out of nowhere, like didn't know any of the rules and understand them and just made their own thing, and there's someone that kind of comes in from a more prepared place as like a student of music, if you will, to kind of really kind of crack the code scientist style. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you were more of a scientist style approach to that, or do you reject that entirely?
I would say it's somewhere between. I mean, I played piano as a kid.
Yeah.
While I started the psychedelic band, I was first chair French horn in the concert orchestra and concert band in junior high school that I was in ninth grade. So, I knew how to make. I had been embedded in music all my life. My dad played classical music on the. We're going to sleep. Anything from Dvorak to Firebird Suite by Stravinsky. But on the other hand, because of psychedelia, it kind of opened the gates. And that's when I really started to write my own stuff, and you could just do whatever sounded cool, And and so what I learned later was called the tritone or the devil's interval. We just called it the warp chord. For like 3 or 4 years, I just called it the warp chord.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I'm more. I've learned how to be more professional about my commentary.
Well, there's something nice about kind of building your lexicon of stuff too, and then being like, oh, that is a thing. Oh, okay, that's the accidental discovery of things that people discovered long ago. When did you get that Fender lead, that lead one? Like that was kind of a unique guitar. Was that pretty early on, or is that?
I always had cheap guitars. I was mostly a bass player until I came to Boston.
Right.
I kind of accidentally became a guitarist. And when Mission of Burma, when it was clear that we were going to, clear to very few people, that we were going to do something, and we had enough gigs that we could buy. I had this really bad PV amp, and I was playing Strats.
Yeah.
And it didn't really have the right sound. Every time I tried to do the sounds I wanted with a Strat, it sounded like Jimi Hendrix, because Jimi Hendrix was the master of the Strat.
Yeah,
and so when we finally had money to purchase gear, the lead one and the lead two were brand new instruments. Literally, no one had played them because they came out in 1980. And so I said, that's the one for me. No one's played it. I can make a mark on it.
Right. There's no other legacy to fight or try to, measure up against, it's just a new thing.
It is interesting though. Pat Place in Bush Tetras, and she was also in the Contortions, I believe. She had one time we played with the Bush Tetras. She also was playing. So she probably did it for the same fucking reason.
Did you guys develop like a single handshake or something, like a secret handshake? The lead shake. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're not really all that great of guitars, but they didn't sound like anybody else, and I liked it because it just had one. It was very punk to me. It had one pickup.
Yeah.
All it had was volume and tone.
Very simple.
That was it. Everything was stripped down, like the Ramones pulled everything back, got rid of all the guitar solos. It's just rhythm and songs.
Yeah.
And so, I pulled it to the most minimal I could get it. Like my foot pedals. All I had was a fuzz tone and a tremolo device that was custom made for me. And that was it until the second version.
Yeah, and that's well, I mean, look, Burma's probably the first time I heard tremolo used in like my kind of music, to put it bluntly. Where I was like, oh, what? I didn't even have the lexicon to describe it. It's like it's doing that weird thing. What is that thing that it is doing? You know, I didn't have.
It's that thing.
It sounds like it's moving around or something. But it also struck me that like you guys kind of coming up when you came up, there was two things happening at the same time, which is like a certain type of band and musician were pushing the envelope and trying new things, and there also was kind of this loose self-categorizing standardization of sounds that were starting to happen as well. But it seems to me that you guys built your own language pretty darn quick and stuck with it.
I would say that's true. I mean, by the time by the time Mission of Burma formed, I'd played in literally, this seems hard to believe, 40 bands since 1967.
40?
Yeah, but sometimes I'd be in 4 bands a year, but at least half of them were originals.
Yeah.
You know, there'd be something we'd get together and do one recording, and then that would be it. You know, nothing that got released. So I was already pretty much a veteran, and when Mission of Burma started, we began with my repertoire from the moving parts. Like Clint really dug that stuff, so did Pete. And so we already had a fairly, forward-looking, direction to start with. And then right away, Clint wrote Peking Spring, and then I wrote right away Einstein's Day, neither of which sound anything like the moving parts. And so, it just kept going from there. And then by the time Versus came out, Pete had added Learn How into the mix.
Yeah.
Our whole thing was just, I don't care what anybody else thinks, playing to baffled audiences was pretty common. And, they're stupid.
Right.
Pretty conceited way of looking at things.
Yeah. Well, it requires a little bit of a chip on your shoulder to make any kind of challenging music seriously.
Right. And you have to have such a belief in it that you don't care what anybody else thinks. If you don't have that, I mean, it's a type of mania or a form of self-centered insanity. But what's kind of interesting is that when we reformed after the Reformation in 2002, we played a little bit slower because Pete couldn't play as fast on the drums. And I think that made the songs more obvious, slightly more. And also the world had caught up to us 20 years later. And
definitely.
The same songs that would just baffle people now people were like going crazy for. It's like, well, that's interesting.
Well, because, there were things that you've been doing that, there was certainly no punk band doing that, but no rock band really doing that kind of thing that way with that intensity. And then also think about, like what was happening in the 90s, like turntablism and like bands like Portishead and stuff like that, where they're integrating just, here's just a weird sound that comes in here that like, it's just there because it sounds cool, which of course, why else would it be there? But people had a chance to, catch up with where you guys are at of being able to accept that kind of thing. And to think of it musically rather than just be like, what's that obnoxious noise? Or
right.
Why is it doing that? I don't like it when it does that. Well, and that, so that reminds me of with Swope, right? Like with that whole aspect of things, that was another thing. And I will confess that it wasn't Burma was not the first band I heard to do tape loops. It was the first band I heard do it in that way, in that capacity.
Right.
How did that come to pass?
Well, Martin moved to Boston when Burma was starting. He was going to play with my brother Ben, who had been in Destroy All Monsters. And then Ben moved back to Ann Arbor, and Martin was kind of stuck in the house where me and Clint lived. And he had to take. He was, Eno was a pretty big deal at that point.
Yeah, man.
And Fripp was his first solo album, Exposure, just came out. So it was a really interesting time. And Martin was into the loops thing, like kind of the Fripp and Eno, and I made piano loops and guitar loops. He did all the looping, and I made up the riffs, and then he plays guitar over it. And it was so. It sounded like, Fripp and Eno shit, like that.
Yeah. That deal, right?
But then I thought I had the song New Disco, which had only 5 lines in it. I'm so tired of your personal grudge. when you come around, my mouth will be a den of vipers. That's 5 lines. That's all the lyrics
Right.
in the song. And I sing one line, then I add another line to it till at the end I'm singing all 5. And so I thought, well, this would be cool if Martin tape looped each one of my first lines. And so by the time I got to the top, all 5 lines would be going around and around simultaneously. Just this wall, this kind of manic wall of insanity.
Yeah.
And,
movement to it, right?
yeah. And that was the beginning of tape loops in the band. And then from there, he kept doing it with other songs, and pretty soon he was in the band files.
Right. And it's such a unique thing that, which I think now it's like closer to again what happened with bands integrating turntables and things along those lines. Well, beyond just which is the thing that seemed to be very prevalent in the 90s for whatever reason, but like that other element of like a freak factor element of adding to it that was like unpredictability or seeming unpredictability, but oftentimes composed and placed as another instrument would be.
Yeah, I mean, he had parts. He would come up with his own parts, like the song "Red." There's this kind of really floaty part in the middle, like kind of like, all really gentle. But he brought that back in at the end of the kind of freeform improv at high speeds. Like, and then as we hit the final chords, he would hit the slow button and go. And that was purely his idea, and I was like, God, that's brilliant. And it's not a huge element to the song, but it's enough that it really adds something to it. So he would have parts like that. It wasn't just pure improv, squiggle, squiggle, squabble.
Right, there was intent behind it, and was used as a compositional element. Not to sidebar too heavily. Was there any crossover in Destroy All Monsters with you and Ron Ashton?
Crossover?
Yeah, like at the same time that Destroy All Monsters was going. I know there was a few iterations. I'll confess I'm not a.
I mean, when Destroy All Monsters started, it was Carrie and Niagara, and I was on drums.
Oh, you were on drums? Oh, wow, okay.
And then Lair and Ben were in a band called M-Pools, Lair's band. They played noise over it. And then that band played one show, and I just couldn't believe that people liked it. But it was really fun. And then Ron got in the band, and it became a rock band.
Right.
And it wasn't really my kind of band. Everybody wanted me to join. I didn't want to join. So once they found a drummer, I went to bass. And once they found a bass player, I went to lights. And so until I left for Boston in 78, they started to rock in 77 spring. I was always peripherally involved. I was never actually in the band.
Yeah. Were you? And the only reason I asked because I feel like that's.
I mean, I knew Ron a tiny bit.
Yeah, but your brother was
Ben and Larry much better. Yeah, actually, I interacted with him on a regular basis.
Were you aware of Stooges and all that at the time? Was that? I mean, it's.
Yeah, I saw the Stooges on their record release show for their first album.
That's awesome.
And then later that year, that was in '69.
Oh, I should say, was that awesome? I guess it depends on what era.
Well, I saw 2 Stooges shows in '69, and I saw the record release show. It was like they were a super tight rock band. They did all the songs for the album super tight. Iggy's dancing was just a freak show. It was at the East Down Theater. It had lots of moves to dance. It was, in a weird way, a professional rock show, except for completely unhinged.
Sure, yeah.
And then the next time I saw them, they were playing a benefit for an underground newspaper in that December, I think. The other one was in the summer. And it was a wall of feedback and Iggy attacking the audience. It was not a single song. So I got the 2 extremes.
Inside you are 2 Stooges, yeah. The dichotomy. Oh, good. Yeah. I was just gonna say, well, I'm just such a fan of. I missed the chance to have Ron on. I did have James Williamson on the show, which I consider a highlight because I find him an interesting player in that later period, and he doesn't do that kind of thing much. So I always, anytime I can dig something out of people that were there, I will. Like Dennis Tech, same thing. Like I pushed him for Stooges information.
Dennis Tech, oh yeah. He and I played together in 9th grade because he was also from.
Get out of town, really? That's awesome.
We just had a jam session. I think we did Gloria and Well-Respected Man.
Wow, that's a pretty good that you can recall the songs. That's pretty good, man.
That's what I knew. It didn't really go anywhere, but I've since his band. What's the name of his band?
Radio Birdman.
Yes. They played the Middle East, and I got there late because I thought it was an evening show, and they were packing up. But I hadn't seen Dennis since '77.
Yeah.
Hung out. It was like really, really fun.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back over to Burma, right? And Signals, Calls, and Marches. How does that come together? First of all, Clint, when does he pull out Revolver, so to speak? I should have said when did he reach for it, but I wouldn't want to be obvious.
Right, that'd be a little too much.
Yeah, it's too much.
Delete that. I mean, when the band formed, I'm just going to go backtrack a little bit.
Yeah. Please, we skipped some stuff. Yeah, go ahead, please.
That's all right. I'm just leading to Revolver because of this. When the band formed, we used my moving part songs as the starting point. Like, I was a prolific writer. I'd written in band since my band in Sproton Layer in 1969, 1970. I kept writing rock music, and so I'm a prolific writer, and I do have lots of ideas. You may not like them, but I do have a lot of them. And so I thought the band was going to be my band. Like, I'm the front man, I'm the guitarist, I'm the singer, I'm the songwriter. And then, what the fuck? Clint wrote Peking Spring, first song he'd ever written in his life. And I go, that changes everything.
Yeah.
The whole view of what was going to happen was changed. And then after that, he just kept writing songs that he'd never written before. I do believe that he felt comfortable enough with me to write. And I'm honored that I was able, that I contributed to him contributing to the world. And so after that, it was like a gate open because he'd never written before in his life, whereas I'd been in bands. And he just kept, like right after Peking Spring was That's How I Escaped My Certain Fate, Academy Fight Song, Okay, No Way. Yeah. And at that time I wrote, Secrets, This Is Not a Photograph, Outlaw, Einstein's Day. We're kind of like going hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I think it was the next year, I think it might have been 80, it might have been, I can't remember the year right now when he wrote Revolver. But I remember the rehearsal extremely well. We're downstairs in the basement at Waldo Terrace in Brighton Center in Boston. And he showed me the, dong, dong, ee. I mean, that's pretty much, we call it the Stooge chord because it's an E drone chord. There's no major, there's no minor.
Right.
The Stooges use it a lot. And, okay, cool. And then the verse was really good. And then the chorus, they showed us the chorus. And as soon as he showed us it once and we played it once, I turned to him and said, "It's a hit, Clint. That's the hit." I mean, it was completely clear to both me and Pete that was a hit. Like, it wasn't.
You had something special.
Yeah. Some songs were cool and became bigger hits than others, but Revolver was like, you could already, even in the basement, you could see the fists going like this, even though nobody had heard it except for us.
You just know that it's like this bangs. This is.
That was the ticket.
Yeah, and those are eclectic moments too. That it's nice to sometimes and sometimes you find out, and sometimes right. sometimes you're like, "This is it, boys. This is the one," and it's fine. Right. People thought, "Oh, that was okay." Yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's all right, fine." So yeah, it's interesting that you guys have a parallel track going on where there's these two sort of literal voices developing in Burma, but also songwriting styles that are sort of this interweaving snake between each other. And again, it led to a situation where, absent of the context of the time, it all makes sense. But was it something that people kind of glommed onto early on, or did people think it was more schizoid or strange, or did it matter?
I mean, there was a very small group of people that right away. I mean, I was not a normal punk rock guitarist. I was actually a pretty advanced guitar player by the time I got to Burma. I didn't really get good until Versus, as far as I'm concerned. But still,
40 bands worth. This is what I hear.
I was mostly a bass player in those days. But yeah, like people people, like, we were a band to watch. Like, everybody knew that Peter from the Malls and me and Clint from Mission of Burma, from the Moving Parts, had formed this band, and that people knew something was going to happen, but we weren't very popular. And from my understanding, that sometimes our shows were disorganized. And I remember reading a review of the band, like, a really good band if they could all play the same song at the same time. And that could be, sometimes we were chaotic on stage, but it could be also like some of our songs leaning more on my side, but from everybody, are sometimes more complex than people are used to.
Well, certainly, yeah, because there's a kind of musical sophistication that people were unused to hearing in, for lack of a better term, aggressive music, or whatever you want to call it.
I mean, by then I'd been a composition major at Cal Arts,
right?
The arts, and I'd played free jazz, and Clint had assimilated all that shit. Like, when we would try out drummers before Pete was in the band, if we didn't like the way the guy looked when he came in, we would play Sun Ra and drink until the guy left. that was our
wow.
method. And Pete didn't leave.
Right, so he passed the test. He didn't take off.
Well, okay, well, we'll go downstairs now and see what happens.
Yeah.
We just took one look and go, there was no spoken word, but it was a Sun Ra night.
That's awesome.
And we both like that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and certainly, I mean, I think now everything kind of exists at the same time, at the same volume, so to speak. So I think that's kind of, in a way, allows younger musicians to be more open-minded about things. But I think that there was definitely, first of all, there's availability of music, let alone having someone to, like, show you, hey, you should check this out. The record store guy or whatever, of, like, you might like this if you like these parts of the Stooges songs where they just go really hog wild. Yeah, you should check out this, these jazz records, because that's basically what they're trying to do and failing ineptly to do so and making their own thing. So it comes together, and it's got the brawn. It's got the like the lyricism and, like, as we mentioned, the musical sophistication, but, like, it's also like a little ahead of its time. So when you start playing shows like Away From Home and things along those lines, finding your musical cohorts, finding contemporaries and like-minded travelers and things along those lines, how does that go initially as a young band? Again, knowing that you'd played in plenty of bands beforehand, but in this band.
Well, this was when I moved to Boston, it was the first time I was playing clubs. There were regular clubs I could play at. That had never happened in Ann Arbor. But in retrospect, we were a pre-post-punk band. Because we weren't a punk band, and post-punk hadn't.
Yeah,
just kind of beginning, and we kind of fell in the cracks. I mean, technically, Husker Du opened up for us our first show in Minneapolis, and they didn't have a record out yet, and we had Academy Max. These bands that became much more famous than us, and were also superb bands. Husker Du, Sonic Youth, they all came a little bit after us. We were a little bit before them. Yeah. As far as records and touring and stuff. Minutemen, I think, were simultaneous. But it was confusing, people didn't know what to make of us. I remember this Minneapolis show, and we were touring on Academy Fight Song, Max Ernst. And the rap was, they can't tell if they're a pop band or an avant-garde band, so what's the point? People couldn't make sense out of it. And I remember even when Versus was, a couple reviews of Versus, I say these a lot, but it's because it's true. One review said, we're just shopping for styles. And to me, we were just a band with diverse ideas.
Yeah.
And one review said, there's only one good song on Versus, and that's Trem 2. Same magazine, they had two people reviews it. And the other one said, every song is good except Trem 2. And really, Trem 2, nowadays, Trem 2 is just part of the Mission of Burma canon, just like any the Ballad of Johnny Burma or Learn How or
Sure.
Micah. It doesn't matter. It's Mission of Burma.
It fits into the tapestry and it fits into the voice of the many things that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
guys do.
But in those days, I mean, we were pretty loud and we were hit or miss, is what people tell me.
Yeah.
I couldn't always tell. And sometimes I would think that we played so badly, I would tell people to leave the dressing room, like, don't come and talk to us. It was terrible. And then I would find out later that people really liked it. And
Right.
Shows I thought were fantastic, and people zero, no response.
That's the worst, is when you think it's terrible, but they want to tell you how great it was, and you're just
I would get away from it.
say less.
We're a little bit extreme, but that's part of what made us what we were. I'm a little more reasonable now.
Right, because there's an accessibility to it, but also, again, composed more progressive noise elements and things along those lines. It's again, it isn't just the one thing. And again, that's the idea of punk rock was supposed to be like, it can be like whatever you want it to be. It's more of an attitude than a genre. And then that quickly kind of, especially getting into, later with like the hardcore stuff of just like, oh no, it has to sound like this. I'm like,
right. I found that to be a little bit, I mean, they're really good hardcore bands.
Sure.
And generally became formulaic, and that absolutely did not interest me.
Yeah. And that's, boy, that the history just repeats itself over and over again, doesn't it? But anyway, so tell me about Versus. So starting off with Secrets on that, was that like a mission statement? Like, hey, strap in, son, here's we go. Like, what did you have the sequencing kind of down from the beginning of how you wanted to have that go?
One of the greatest virtues and the greatest problems of Mission of Burma is that everything is by committee. And so
Bolshevik democracy, huh?
Yeah. And so sometimes it took a long time to come to conclusions, but I don't remember that being a real problem with that record. I mean, we like Secrets because it just starts with an instrumental and it builds to a vocal, and then from then on, okay, it must be a rock record. And then it ends. I mean, what I like about Secrets, and this, I'm not Secrets, but the album, and this is total a fluke. But the first vocal you hear on the record is Pete screaming before.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And the very last song on the album, when Certain Fate, the tape runs out, Pete's going, and then that's it. So it's bracketed by Pete screaming. And in a way, that's like, that pretty much sums up the record.
Right, exactly. You could do worse. You got bookends, right?
Right. I mean, it's like it's a well thought out symphony.
Yeah, symphony of screaming. Yeah,
really accidental.
Yeah. So okay. So then, and we've talked a lot about Trem too. But was there any thought for recording that? Because again,
this is how we recorded it. And, it's very much in the air at the time. Particularly the American bands, I think, were going to the studio and just playing their set. Husker Du would do that. Other bands, and I mean, we were ahead of Husker Du, but it was the thing that was in the air for people to do, and I like that idea of a minimalist, raw. Yeah, it's very much a proletarian activity. We are a band now. We are recording the band, and so what we did was we did 5-song sets. We do 5 different songs. We go through, and then we listen to it, and we go, Einstein's Day, which was the first song that we kept. That's good, and this one's good. So we pulled those out, and then we did another 5-song set, and we just kept pulling the songs out that had good takes. We never did them again until we got every song recorded. More, and some of them just weren't good enough.
Yeah, well, because were there any songs that like didn't make? Because I know there was the was it the CD reissue? Right, there was a few.
Progress is on the CD reissue.
Yeah,
Forget. Laugh the World Away.
Yeah, and that's I have 2 versions. One, there's also the Matador version. It's like a different order, if I remember correctly. But like whatever, they're on there at the end.
I just play guitar.
Fair enough. So you got little like mini blocks of songs, and you're kind of picking the best take out of all of them, and working on from there. Then that's how that came together. Yeah. And then Did things deviate that much as far as speed, feel?
What's funny is we did 2 versions of Fun World, and the take we did, we got in the studio and I realized I'd sang the second verse twice in the version that I like. So we took the vocals from the other one and dropped them in, but the song, we played the other one faster. So
it's a different speed.
My vocals by the end start to drift slightly out of time.
Oh,
it's kind of an interesting way. And we thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I just thought that was like an aesthetic decision. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But
I mean, it was one of those. I mean, Burma has this weird casualness. That that's interesting.
That sounds cool.
It's out of sync, but it's still kind of cool. It's a mysterious. We don't know what. And like the tape ran out on Certain Fate, but it sounded so good that we just kept it.
It's kind of the perfect way to end it, really, isn't it? I mean,
we were criticized by some people for it, but that's just too bad.
Yeah, I thought it was bold and amusing and kind of cool, in that sort of way. Like literally, especially when you have like there's actual tape manipulation going on this record. It's like no, the tape got manipulated at the end of the song too.
And the song "Fun World," we started the riff, and Rick was telling the engineer, who's not credited on the record because he was so anti what we were doing, said, start the tape. And the guy, well, they've got to stop and start over again. And Rick kept hitting. I wasn't there, but Rick told me. And so you hear at the beginning of the song go, Phew!
Yeah.
Because we're already starting playing. We're not waiting for this motherfucker, man. And
awesome.
And that gives it a cool sound though. That's part of the energy of the song is that we're already started before the record starts.
Right. It's like dropping in on a conversation halfway through or something,
Yeah. And that appealed to us.
Yeah. It's
we
not.
could have probably cut the other one and spliced them together and made it sound natural. But what's natural about a recording? Nothing. There's no band in your turntable. There's no band in your CD player. That's an artifice.
Absolutely. Well, and there's live and there's recorded, right? And they don't have to be the same thing. In fact, one can argue that they usually shouldn't be.
Right, and they aren't, because one of them you can control the volume.
Yeah.
With Mission of Burma, you couldn't.
So after Versus, so tell me about when your tinnitus first started to kind of creep up.
It was in Ann Arbor, actually, in 1977. I was working with Destroy All Monsters, playing drums and bass, and then I had my own band, Red Ants, which never really it just never got going.
Sure.
But it was really loud, and I was playing with a ring modulator on my guitar a lot.
Oh man!
And sometime in the early fall, I heard this ringing tone. I was attending a University of Michigan new music concert, and I said, "What's that sound?" When I walked in, because it's so quiet, and then something happened and it went away. And I go, oh, great, it's gone. So I went to see Destroy All Monsters, and of course it came back. And it's never really gone away since. But so that was partly why I couldn't get anything going in Ann Arbor. So I just said, fuck it, I'll move to Boston, become a piano tuner. But so I already had tinnitus.
Yeah, like literally the guy that comes in and tunes the piano. Like.
Yeah. Because I like music. But the minute I came to Boston, like the scene was so vibrant that I said, fuck it, man. I have this album that I've had in me for years. And then, I will go to my grave regretting my life if I don't join this. And then I joined Moving Parts in Burma. So my tinnitus was already in place and I already knew it. And in a weird way, I already knew that I had a limited lifetime. Well, I was wearing earplugs, and Clint, when Mission of Burma started, he had tinnitus too. It just wasn't as bad as mine, and he didn't talk about it as much. And millions of people have tinnitus.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it's
particularly now, but
I mean, I'm sure half the people listening to this show have tinnitus in some capacity or fashion.
I was the poster boy there for a while. I'm the sick one. I'm the sick one.
Right. Well, and no, but it's it doesn't come back. That's the thing. It's not like you get used to it, but it doesn't like really come back. And again, that whole like that idea of there being like a clock that runs down of like this is the amount of time that you can do this.
Well,
right.
It's funny that when I broke up the band, when I quit the band, they could have continued if they could have found another guitarist. They didn't. In '83, I said, I want to be able to hear when I'm 50.
Right.
In 2002, when Mission reformed, I was 50 and I could hear perfectly well. So let's go,
There
boys.
you go. Yeah, right. Let it ride, folks. Let it ride.
But here's another bit of irony to this whole thing. You know, I've done a lot of soundtrack work and I've composed for string quartets. And I had a string quartet doing a score for a film that I was working on. And they asked me about my life. And, you know, we talk, as people do. And I said, you know, I'm a rocker. I'm known for this. But as, you know, stupid rocker tricks, I had to quit because I got really bad tinnitus. And they just looked at me and said, oh, we all have tinnitus. There were, you know, right behind the third chair violin players, there's trumpet players with a trumpet thing right here, and there's a fanfare at triple forte, and your ear does not have time to close down, and bam! So people in the orchestra, they say they have tinnitus too. And I go, well, maybe I'm not an idiot, you know. Maybe it's just part of, you know, it's just part of the job. Like if you're a football player, you're gonna break your elbow, and, you know, get concussion. If you're a computer guy, you're going to get, you know, whatever that thing, carpal tunnel.
Repetitive stress injury. Yeah.
Body works out and you die.
Yeah. So, no, and I mean, I guess there's some comfort in that. Sure. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's. You know, I remember when we broke up, we were interviewed on WBCN, you know, the big FM station in Boston, and they said, well, was it worth it to have tinnitus now to play in Mission of Burma? I go, oh, totally. Yeah. I looked at them, and it was like, I had to do that, and I did it, and, you know, and then we reformed, and we're still really good.
Yeah, and that's, and I do want to get into that. I don't want to skip past those like long years, because that's, because didn't Alloy Orchestra, when did that start up? Because first of all, what's the Alloy Orchestra into Anvil Orchestra? What's the distinction?
One of the members of Alloy Orchestra didn't want to play anymore, and we wanted to vary the name slightly.
Perfect.
But I did. I mean, between.
But you still wanted to be early on in the phone book, right? So.
Yeah, right. I mean, it sounds similar enough.
Yeah, right. Same syllables.
The reason the name came about is because Roger Ebert was announcing the Alloy Orchestra from the stage, and he accidentally said Anvil Orchestra.
Really?
And so we've always thought that was a good name, so we decided to use it.
That's awesome. That's a great origin story. Jeez. So how does that all come to pass? Because again, you mentioned having like a background in composition, right? And so was like, when did you first have the idea of like scoring stuff in that way, like composing it for like utilizing like a non-rock band format? Meaning,
I mean, I always accompanied dance classes. Whenever I was at a university, I was a dance accompanist. I was offered in '77, instead of going to Boston, I could have been a full-time dance accompanist at the University of Michigan. Technically, it's extremely likely I played for a dance class that Madonna was in, because she was modern at that time, and I was the main modern piano accompanist. But I didn't know because she didn't have any records out. So
right, exactly. How would you know? Yeah,
and I was offered a full-time position, and I could have taken over the dance piano, and I could have had a comfortable university job for the rest of my life. And I said, that's not for me. And luckily I said that because Mission of Burma was a much better option.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the idea, like I've always been, I have despite being extremely self-motivated and having ideas that nobody else would have or want on occasion, I'm able to merge pretty well with other people. Like I have a need to engage with what's around me and to merge with it. So that makes me a good accompanist. Like I was a good dance accompanist. When I was at Cal Arts or TJC, that's what I did, University of Michigan, and got paid for it. And so doing soundtrack work was a natural, and I was doing soundtrack work already. And then Alloy Orchestra already existed, the silent film company. I'd done a little bit of it on the side, but it wasn't very serious. But Alloy Orchestra would tour the U.S. and play festivals and stuff, and make thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Really money. And so when one of the keyboard player that had been one of the primary drivers for 6 years committed suicide, and I had already played with both the other guys, had been in bands of mine, and they called me up and said, "We want to keep our band going. Would you like to play? Would you like to step in?" And I would rather. I like playing in bands. And I like performing. Like when you do soundtrack work, you're sitting at the computer and you hire the musicians, and then it's done. And you're stressed out because they want last minute changes. But when you have a band, you compose, you're performing it, and it's a performance. When the show is over, the show's over. You know,
Right,
and next time you might be better or worse, but it's like a band. I like playing in bands. You know, and so I was a natural fit for it. And it took off when I joined the band. We played a lot more and took off.
And that was like what, like around that was the 90s, right? It was like late 90s.
Yeah, 98. That was 98. I mean, I did between 83 and 98. I did a lot of stuff.
You did plenty of stuff in between there, yeah. No, but I have a vested interest in. I love silent films and accompaniment that is, you know, more modern accompaniment. I think is a very cool. Like I feel like it's kind of hacky just to do the same old nonsense. Like in the same way that like the new thing in movie previews now is, let's take a song everyone knows and let's have like a quiet kind of minor key version of it. And like, okay, the first time that was great. And the second time I was like, oh, you're doing the thing that the other one did. And then like the 300th time, it's like, Jesus Christ, get a new trick. And so for that same way, I feel like that there's a lot of very safe compositions for accompaniments of silent films because people are there to see the film. They're not necessarily usually there for the music. And so you end up in the situations where there's opportunities to do more interesting stuff, and oftentimes those opportunities are not excised.
Right.
They're not exercised.
I mean, we're when Alloy changed to Anvil, we're doing more improvisation.
Yeah,
because the band is more suitable for that. And we're playing the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the classic German expressionist film at the Milwaukee Film Festival, and that's 100% improv. I just have like a little, cue sheet of the scene changes and what I might like to do, but there's no notes. And our first performance, we'd never even rehearsed it, and it went so well. And I'm playing, besides a synthesizer with kind of spooky, because it's the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah.
Spooky string synth sounds and some piano for the more emotional parts. I'm also playing a toy piano. I have a cymbal, and I'm playing cornet. And then the other guy is playing a bunch of percussion, like odd percussion sounds, bowing pieces of metal, and he's playing accordion and weird pans and stuff. So we're just emoting and just moving the film along, but we're being creepy in the same way that the film is, but for a 21st century audience. And people loved it. When we played it at the Roger Ebert Film Festival last year, the people there said it was the best score we'd ever done. And we'd been playing there for 15 years with these heavily composed scores.
Right.
And we just let it rip. Yeah. This is what we should have been doing.
I guess we could have not put in all that work and composed all that music and have the same effect. Right. Well, because you're painting with mood almost, right?
Yeah,
is what it comes.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari also suits that. It's like hard to tell what's going on. It's real slow moving. Whereas other films, the last time we were there, we did Man with a Movie Camera.
Oh,
no,
cool.
Sorry. Either that or Metropolis. I honestly can't. I think it was Metropolis, and that's because it's epic and there's major scene changes. You really have leitmotifs, structures, things that are very composed.
You got to break it up.
It's within that, but that's a more tightly scripted environment. Because
it's not going to be a one size fits all situation for the film versus the music. Like for some things. It seems like you'd almost need to go scene by scene to figure it out, right?
Right, and with Metropolis, it's so epic. Like literally, there's thousands of people on screen. So we need both our drummers. We have an extra drummer, Larry Dersh, who plays in my band Trinary System, my other band. He played with. So we have two drummers, like these epic scenes where the buildings are flooding. Two drummers are just wailing away, and I'm just hammering with my fingers like frozen in octaves, just chords that are changing with mood it's over the top drama.
Yeah.
Metropolis is a ridiculous film.
Oh yeah, it's amazing,
Totally
but it's
amazing. Yeah.
like you have to keep up with the visuals, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's
And
like
it's
one
too
of the first big expressionistic sci-fi, really one of the first sci-fi movies. If you stop and think about it,
It's the ultimate ultimate silent film. Really.
Yeah, and something where it's so you don't want to be the thing like taking it down a notch.
No, you do not want to take it down a notch.
No one's looking for that, right? So there's that. And there was a lot of other. I mean, I think you did like what Nosferatu, right?
We're doing at the Eberfest this year. We're doing Blackmail, which is Alfred Hitchcock's last silent film, and it's a total Hitchcock film. There's like he has a little cameo in it on a bus. The kid is bothering him. It's got everything, like nobody's innocent in the film.
Yeah, it's
got just his use of shadows. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's really low key for us too. It's like the polar opposite of Metropolis. And it's just me and Terry. It's just the two of us, and between the two of us, because we had 3 people before, and now we only have 2, we have much more room to just change things and really fit the scene. Because the more people you have, somebody has to be conducting. And here, there's just 2 of us. And if one of us goes off, the other one knows and follows along. So it's really, really fun film.
That's awesome. Yeah, I confess I've seen a lot of Hitchcock. I don't think I've seen any of the silent films, but
this one
I've always been curious.
Yeah, you can drive down to Champaign, Illinois. It's it's only 6 hours.
Yeah, it's not that far. Depending on what I got going on, I've driven further for less. Let me put it that way. But also I tour, so take of that what you will.
Right.
At least I know I'd be seeing something cool. So the compositional aspect of it, and being in that world do you feel like there's a through line through the stuff that you've done with your, with like Trinary System and Burma and like with the bands and that, or is it kind of like totally different muscle group, totally different? I think of these things differently.
Well, when you're an accompanist, like, I've accompanied dance classes, I've done regular soundtracks where you make the music, someone else does the sound design. When you're doing silent film, you are everything. You are the music, you're covering the vocals because there's no talking, and there's no sound design, so you are listening. That's why silent film accompaniment is more fun than regular scoring. And I've scored films that have appeared at Sundance and stuff. But when you're doing accompaniment, it's really different than when I generate something from inside my brain or with freeform improv with my associates. Because when you're accompanying, that what you're accompanying does not change.
Right.
Hitchcock is going to show up on the bus at minute 12:17, and you've got to be playing this theme or something similar, to get you to the next scene.
It's not like he's going to be late for the bus on that.
He's not going to be late for the bus. So you have to. It's more. I'm using my skill set to adapt to a situation. Whereas Mission of Burma or Trinary System or my current stuff, the solo electric guitar ensemble, is purely generated from me, and it's as far as music, it's much closer to what interests me than the accompaniment stuff.
Right. Well, and that's I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to bring up the dream interpretations for solo electric guitar ensemble, I think is the full title, right? Really cool release and interesting. Like how many of them? So they're numbered, right? How many of them ultimately are there? First of all, let's start with that.
Well, are we
talking triple digits or?
That was, I viewed them. They're kind of like a formal structure. Like when I was a kid, I played like simple Beethoven sonatas or Mozart, and they'd be called Sonata Number 1, Sonata Number 2, Sonata. And so I started numbering my dream interpretations when I made my first one. Dream interpretation number 1 for solo violin was 1975. And so this was literally the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20th. And the next album's going to have 21, 22, 23, 24. Except for this album, I've decided to not make them. I did the formal thing. This one, I'm giving them titles, such as whatever is kind of the pivot. Like in this one piece, in the middle of the dream, I'm looking for a piece of for a stick that's like an Aztec war club. So nice. I'm calling the piece Aztec War Club, even though that shouldn't sum up the whole thing, but it's a nice little hook, or
it's a shorthand for things.
Yeah. But in parentheses, it will be dream interpretation number 22. So, I just keep, as I write them, they're the next number.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, it seems like, looping and stuff is very pivotal there. There's a lot of, I associated with like Glenn Branca, like unison kind of, like everything kind of chiming out in unison, things like that. But I think you even have used like pedal steels and stuff, right?
Well, it's a curious thing that I have 3 lap steels, but they're all on stands, so they're not in my lap. Right. And they're not pedal. The pedals don't change them. And 2 of them I have kind of bass strings, and so they become like portable prepared pianos. And I've done
cool.
prepared piano work, but I can't bring a prepared piano with me, and some places don't want me to prepare the piano. So there was a way to make it a guitar.
Yeah, you have to prepare to pay for it if you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then I've got the third one is tuned to a Glenn Branca unison E. That's so I use, but sometimes I'll prepare it and use it as a percussion instrument. So the lap steels become a mixture of percussion and bass. Like, I can't explain it very well, but it's a blend between the 2 types of sounds.
Because you get like a percussive kind of sound, right? And that kind of.
Some of the deep tones are like a floor tom or something. Like they're deep, but they're not really an A. They're like, because they've got alligator clips on them, they've got shattered harmonics like most percussion does. Most percussion is not tuned to a concert pitch. It's a general zone. Yeah, so I have those the 2 that are prepared are like my prepared piano things, which they do the bass and the percussion, and the other one can do like this really thick melodies, the one with 6 E strings, which is like Glenn Branca technique.
Yeah, that's
and then I have my Strat, which I can play normal, normal notes. But then I've got a looper that I can have 3 different loops going at the same time, different speeds. I can make one drop an octave. I can layer different ones. And so it's a really layered effect, and I have stereo foot pedals. So
looping technology has like come so far in the past couple decades too.
Yeah. But I prefer it to be physical. I don't want to be just sitting there with a laptop. I want there to be a sense of danger.
No, this is like almost like I ascribe to like the cartoon Octopus. It's like the one-man band, right?
It's definitely the one person ensemble thing.
Yeah, like the cymbals on your knees and you clap them together.
When I'm playing, I'm trying to rip, and I am in fact ripping on the guitar, but I'm reading music, and as I'm ripping, it says, "Okay, change that thing." So I'm looking down while I'm ripping. I'm hitting the button that's going to make the next button go backwards, and then I hit that backwards on the chord. Looking over here, change the fuzz tone off, add a delay, change this other guitar, and that on a chord, and then I hit the octave down on the foot pedal. And then all of a sudden you've been going like 1,000 miles an hour. Now all of a sudden space opened up. You entered over the top of a cliff, and you're floating in the air.
Well, and you're using these tools as compositional elements to change mood, right?
Yeah, and it's all organized by dreams. It's like their accompaniment to my dreams,
right?
Which is a technique I developed in '75 based on surrealism, and so the dream structure all the compositions. Like if someone says, "Why did you do that?" I could look at the dream and tell you, "Well, yeah, I dropped it an octave there because I had climbed to the top of a cliff and I looked down and I saw the Connecticut River down below and a few people there. That's why it drops down, because I'm looking down like quarter of a mile down there." It's all stuff. All the stuff that happens in the music is because of something that happened.
Is that from? Do you journal with that? Is that how you?
Yeah. I have a dream journal from 1971.
Nice.
A journal and a dream journal. I had a really good girlfriend that did journaling at that time, and every year I have a dream journal and a journal. Which one's more important? It's all what your life.
It's all relative, I suppose. Yeah, it depends on what you're up to.
It does.
There's like the limbic accounting and the non-limbic accounting. No, but I think that's fascinating because I think that there's something to be said for, things with tactile controls and the ability, no matter how well structured it is, there's always like the chaos element of
Right.
something can be different in a good way and something could potentially be different in a bad way, depending on how it goes. But it's not going to be wrong. It's just going to be different.
Right. That's what I try to tell myself.
Right. Exactly. No, it's jazz.
But I also, I really like to read, and I buy books. I don't want to buy something to look on the computer because I already look on the computer too much. When you're holding a book, it's more physical, and like playing a guitar and hitting the foot pedal is a physical act. And I believe that I have a body.
Right. No, testify that. I have this.
Plug into my phone and just put it here, and just there's where I live. This little tiny spot here.
I love to read, but reading on the computer or even like a tablet, it's not for me. Like an article or something, fine. But
I read some fascinating articles online, but if I really want to get something, I'll buy a book.
I've gotten really into going to the library actually this year. It's actually been kind of awesome.
Yeah, when I moved to Boston, the Brookline Library, I lived in Brookline, right on the edge of Brookline, and that's where I got the books on Max Ernst, and I realized that he was the guy for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I was driving a cab at the time, and they were going, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I was going to the bathroom." But really, I parked my cab, and I went up because I had ideas for the song, and I was working on Max Ernst, and they were like, "Where are you? I have a bunch of jobs for you." I'm like, "What? Sorry, we're in for like 40 minutes. I can't remember.
I'm too busy reading about Dadaist sculpture and poetry.
I had a job to do, and it wasn't driving the fucking cab.
Yeah. Can someone else do it? I'm busy.
Right, I'm busy. In the long run, it worked out.
Right. It worked out good. So tell me about getting back into Burma. You mentioned the whole like the 50 thing, which is hilarious. But again, I think the world kind of caught up to you guys, and it was kind of cool to see. I never thought I was ever going to see him play at all. Period. I was like, well, missed that boat. I was too busy being like 3 or whatever. Whatever it was when.
Right. I mean, what can you do?
I would have been a really clued in preschooler. Yeah.
Right. I can dig that.
So the coolest kid who's not even in kindergarten yet. Yeah. Had there always been kind of a unfinished business mindset with Burma?
Nothing whatsoever. People would often ask us to reunion, and the joke was that we'd just go on stage and play cards. And that would be it.
Maybe get some Sun Ryan. Who knows? Yeah.
Here's what happened. I don't know. I seem to be visible on occasion, and somebody contacted me and said they wanted us to play the Avery Fisher Hall at the Lincoln Center in New York with Yola Tango and all these bands, and people had asked us to play over and over, and I said, I was just gonna tell them no, come on. And I said, well, this is big enough that I should at least ask Clint, and he'll say no.
You don't have to be the bad guy on that one. Yeah.
And Clint said, I want to do it. And I go, oh, fuck, what the? You want to do it? Like, I thought they were going to say no. And then I asked Pete, assuming he would, thank God, Pete will be the voice of reason and say no. And he said, oh, we should do it. And so I was outvoted, so we had to do it.
That's awesome.
That's the way Burma is. And so we decided, but we didn't want to play that show.
Right.
We wanted to play, though. And somehow we decided we wanted to play. And the weird thing is that summer, Wire toured. They did some of their old stuff. And Pete's band.
Right, they did those EPs that made into the Send album around that time. If I remember, which were super cool. It was like, oh my god, this is
totally cool. And Pete's band, Peer Group, was the opening act, and Clint was at that point the bass player for Peer Group. It was just he just wanted to do something, And I said, God, wire. And I didn't have any money. So I said, Pete, can I play cornet and organ in your band so I can see Wire? He said, sure. So all three of us were on stage opening for Wire.
Yeah.
And Wire is obviously a touchstone for Mission of Burma.
Sure.
And I hung out afterwards and talked to them, and I was like awkward. Like now, if I see any of those guys, it's like cool. Hey, how's it going? But at that point, I was still, shy about it because they were.
It's Wire. If you're a certain type of musician or even music fan, it's like they're demigods.
Right,
Jesus.
Right. But so one could argue that all three of the three musician members of the band playing in a band opening for Wire might have had something to do with it. But you could argue that the fact that Joey Ramone died might have had something to do with it. You could argue that like 7 or 8 things could have had something to do with it.
Sure.
But the fact is that what I thought would never happen, we decided to do. And then I said, we got to call Mark Cates because someone's got to wrangle this shit together. And Mark Cates, he worked for some real labels out west. And I called, he was on the Cape. He's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
He toured with Birdsongs of the Mesozoic, for God's sake. And I worked for Ace of Arts Records. And I called him up on the Cape and I said, Burma's going to reform. And literally, for about a minute, he just sputtered. It was like, he just couldn't believe it. And it's just going to happen. We're not sure why.
Right.
And so he took over and made it work because we really needed someone to organize.
To wrangle the logistics.
We were going to play one show in Boston and one show in New York.
Yeah.
And that became, we sold out Avalon, which is 1,800 seats. And then we sold out 3 shows at the Paradise, which is 500 seat. And we played 2 nights in a row, sold out at Irving Plaza in New York City. Yeah. It went from 2 little shows and we're going to stop to that. And then Bob Weston, who we recruited to do tape loops, his band, Shellac, was playing all tomorrow's parties in England. They asked us to play, and we'd never played in England back in the day. So, well, we can't turn that down.
Yeah, let's have an adventure. Let's do it. Yeah.
And when we first played, we agreed that for us to play, we all have to have 1 new song. So we all brought in 1 new song, and then by the time we got to ATP, other songs were starting to materialize in our heads, and then it just accidentally snowballed from there, like everything with Burma. Like there's no head to Burma. Let me get my hand up. There's no head to Burma. It's all just like the stumbling thing with like 7 brains ends up going the same direction.
Right. Sure. No, and
that's what happened. And until at the end, I had written 2 songs, nobody else wrote any, and I said, no one else is going to write, so I think the band is over. And everybody eventually realized that was also true.
Right, because if you're not creating new things, you don't want to be like your equivalent of like a Vegas lounge act or something.
Right. That's why the band was valid when we reformed. The word on the street, as it were, or in the press, was that we picked up where we like March 1983, January 2002. They were back to back. It was just like
on, off, on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was on, then it was off, then it was on. Yeah, it's in the title.
And so when we did those first shows, we all had 1 new song. And we just kept writing songs until at the end, I was the only one writing and no one else was. So I said, I think that's it. And then, it was a little bit of like, really? And then we all realized,
Well, and it's the rare case where, and I do agree. I think it was a case of it more seeming like a pause than anything else when it comes back. But that second round lasted longer than the original run of the band, right? If I remember correctly.
But no matter how you look at it, though, and I think that the Obliterati and Unsound are both really good records. The other 2 I have mixed.
Yeah.
But I'm the artist. I'm allowed to have any feelings I want. I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
So I say. But no matter what we did, our greatest innovations were like in the first period. Like Versus was, right. I was doing an interview today, and they were saying like that was the template for all the bands that followed afterward. I go, really? Well, I've heard people say that before, so there must be at least something to it. But whereas the stuff we did since was not a template for the bands that followed in the 2010s, you know. So it was
No, but it was still good. I mean, like, there's nothing, you know.
It was good. I mean, in the sense that it's like, let's say, to me, Sonic Youth's great albums are Evil and Sister, and then Daydream Nation. To me, they figured out how to be a rock band, so it's not as interesting to me. But still, those three are their most groundbreaking records. And then after that, they were just an extremely interesting band. Just like, you know, I think the Obliterati is really good. Like, I think that's our best reunion album, and I really stand behind it, and I would fight for it. But it's not as revolutionary as Versus, no matter how you look at it.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, that's
I lived for revolution.
It kind of depends on what you're going for with it, but it's some might say it's enough just to do it, but also, like, it has to be up to a certain standard. Then it has to be up to a certain standard, and if you feel that that's not there, then you shouldn't do it. And you know, there's bands that overstayed their welcome, and you know, there's sometimes it's like, oh, cool, there's that's great, there's new material. And sometimes like, oh, there's new material, huh? Okay. And it's a little less exciting. I'm not naming names, but but
we can all name names, but we won't.
Yeah, well, I could, yeah. But I think it's, you know, like there's something to it. And by the way, those are my favorite Sonic Youth records as well, too, as I think they are, but most people of a certain age. But I think that, you know, if people are talking about like the greatest punk records of all time or whatever, then yeah, Versus is going to be on it, right next to like Flipper and you know, Para Ubu and like all of these other records. And I guess it's a little easier because like there isn't a vast and sweeping catalog from the first iteration of the band, right? It's sort of like, oh well, that's the record. I mean, there's the EP, there's like the single, one of the coolest debut singles too. But like, if you're in a situation where you're being creatively viable, you want everyone to have sweat equity in it. And if people are not
right,
if there isn't either the enthusiasm or the creativity or both, really, then you know, sometimes you might ask yourself, well, why not just stop it while we're ahead?
Right, and that's why we did stop. But
I like all those reading records, by the way. I think they're all good, personally.
Well, yeah. While we were active, we all gave it our all. It wasn't the same as the first round of the band, where we lived the band day in and day out. This was like we'd get together every 3 months and we'd have some new songs. But in those days, we rehearsed every day and played seven shows a month, every single month. You know, I mean, like Wire's third album was called 154 because that's how many shows they played.
How many shows they played, yeah.
Our first album would have been called 300.
Wow.
You know,
yeah.
That's 6 times as many shows per record. You know, like something like that. I'm slightly exaggerating, but it's close.
Yeah, eat it, Conan, Newman.
Yeah, and so I mean, when we played shows, we gave it our all. Yeah. Always, you know. Sometimes we were much more uneven the first round, but we're also more, I believe, you know, technically more innovative. But the second round, we really had. I think we slowed down a little bit, particularly I think because of Pete. Mm-hmm. When you're 20 years older, you can't play that fast.
Right.
And thank God you can't, because I've listened to some of those live shows, a song like Playland, to some other songs. How could people even make sense out of this?
Just because it's rushing, you lose all the nuance, right?
Right, so. Right. The nuance is all gone, and now we just played it about 2% slower.
Yeah.
A little more nuance, and the world had caught up with our aesthetic. And so, you know, we could just go on stage and play the first song, and people would be totally there with us, and that we'd just feed back this loop.
Right. Yeah, they're engaging with it on a different level than just, you know, the spectacle of like, what's this all about?
Yeah. And so as far as performing, I think the second round was vastly superior to the first. But as far as ideas, the first round had, you know, that's where we figured out who we were. In the second round, we were just continuing to be who we were. And as we all know, Revolver is better than Sgt. Pepper's.
Right.
That's where they were figuring it out, and then that's where they got it. They figured out that now this is how we do it.
That's funny because I think at one point I told Bob that I thought one of the songs, I don't even remember which one of the songs on one of the reunion records, like, that reminds me of the Beatles, and he was like, what?
No,
I don't remember which one. Bob Weston.
on the Shellac record, or
No, one of the Burma reunion. I don't remember which one it was though.
Oh.
I'd have to listen to it. Tell you.
There's one called Sevens, I think, is on it, and it's very. It is. He's got the more pop side. So
Yeah.
I've written some pop stuff too, and he's done some avant shit.
Sure. Yeah.
But there is one on there that is kind of Beatles.
Yeah, and like he was like kind of taken aback when I said, I'm like, no, I mean that as a compliment. I was like,
Yeah, I mean, if we can make
Beatles.
resonates with the Beatles, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, who am I, Steve Albini? Yeah, I mean it as a compliment. Peace and love, peace and love. No, so speaking of Bob, so Swope wasn't down for doing it. He's having a good time in Hawaii. You know?
He didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm.
Bob, perfect person to fill that role.
Yeah, we looked at the different options, and there was the talk about, and Lee Ronaldo could have, he's done loop stuff.
Sure.
While I was doing looping with Maximum Piano, he did that looping record for SST, and so we that's, I've played with him off and on.
Yeah, he's a like-minded dude. Sure.
Yeah, and but it was better to get someone that was integral to the band. Lee would have been like, the guy from Sonic Youth sitting in with us,
Right.
Whereas Bob was like, he became part of Burma. And so in the long run, that was a better bet.
Right, because he wasn't doing the thing of like, oh, it's Bob Weston from Shellac playing with Burma. He like did everything he could to kind of sublimate that he was even there. He was like this. He was doing the thing and making.
Because when we first started rehearsing for shows, which was freaky as fuck that we were doing this. But because I'm the guy that would know this. I explained to Martin. I explained to Bob what Martin did in every song because I knew.
Right.
Because he was the guy that brought Martin. So I explained to him, and then I said, after this, any new song, you can do whatever you want. And some occasions he would be pretty subtle, and then sometimes he would, particularly because Pete's always yelling and stuff on stage, and sometimes he would just yell some really funny shit. And Bob, these are the second incarnation, Bob would loop Pete's ridiculous statements over and over. Yeah. But it was perfect. It was like we all knew it was hilarious, and Pete knew it was ridiculous, and we all knew it was ridiculous, but it was amazing. It was just Bob being Bob also. And so, that was really, really cool.
Yeah, I saw a few of those shows, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, and in the kind of way that somebody would have to be a pretty astute listener to just be like, oh yeah, that's only happening tonight. That's not a thing that's like a part of that song necessarily, but like in a way that wasn't disruptive or stole focus, unless that was the point of it was to steal focus.
It was part of the band. Yeah.
And I remember you guys just, I mean, it seemed like every time I saw you guys play, it always seemed like the adventure of it was definitely the point. And I remember, like, look, Wipers are one of my favorite bands of all time. When you guys busted this Youth of America, I was like, whoa, I did not expect that, but that's cool.
There's a recording of it on, I think it's called Snapshot. It's like an EP recorded.
Yeah.
And it's really, I stand behind it. It's like, wow, we did that song and we didn't suck and we sounded good, and we did it justice. And that's, when something's a masterpiece already.
Right. It's one of the great psych punk rock songs.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when that song WMBR would play it. And if I was in a car, I would just stop the car and pull over. Like, I'm not going to keep driving for this shit. I'm going to be listening.
Yeah. Cause it's so crazy. I mean, like that, for lack of a better term, like they're so like it's so urgent and catchy at the same time, but like also the whole section where it just like kind of goes and then comes back.
But then that melody comes in, and it's such an emotional, like it's quite possible, depending on my condition, that I could have cried when I heard that because it's so urgent and honest and it's sincere that you just want to like, it just takes over your emotions, just like,
Yeah.
it just releases shit. And that's, that's what beautiful art does. And Youth of America is beautiful.
And that's a well said, because that's Greg Zage's whole deal, right? We're just like this crazy, Hendrix style punk rock player as far as playing ability goes, that just is the most expressive field player ever, and was able to communicate so much with the language of guitar, to the point that you would think it was an uncoverable song, unless you're approaching it in such a way that you're not trying to. Well, you wouldn't be doing a blues band cover of Youth of America, but like,
no, we were like seriously making sure that we pulled everything out of it that was crucial.
Yeah.
And when we went into the improv section, I did play those little fragments of the melody, but in between I would do my own thing and everybody else would be doing their own thing.
It was with the Mission of Burma sensibility to it, which lent to. I mean, the same way the only other band I've seen be able to do it well was Melvins, and it was the same deal where it's like, no, it's not exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Did you say the Melvins did it?
Yeah. And it was great. And
I would love to hear that.
Two drummer version too, which also was pretty fantastic.
I always carry a small notebook and a pen with me. I'm very analog. It's like this is my external hard drive right here. I'm writing down right this moment Melvin's Youth of America because I have to hear that.
Yeah, I feel like that's how covers should be, right? It should have the sensibility and the feel of the artist, rather than just being, a carbon copy.
Right. Well, if you're just playing the notes, you're not playing the song.
Yeah. Yeah. So when things start to wind down for Burma, that's something where, did you feel like you got what you needed from that? Did you feel like you got to like do all the adventures that you want to do? Did you feel like you got to kind of like, did the whole thing feel like a bonus round or a continuation, first of all?
Well, at first it was freaky as fuck.
Yeah,
like,
that's a long time, man.
And we're playing Irving Plaza, where we used to open up for Gang of Four in the fall, and we're selling out 2 nights in a row. And it was kind of schizophrenic. It's like, 20 years later, I have a kid, and what the fuck? What is this? But once it got going, like once we played ATP, and that was the first time we ever played Europe. We couldn't turn it down because Burma never played Europe.
Yeah, you got to.
So
absolutely.
That's what led us to keep on going, and you can blame Bob and Steve for that.
Yeah.
Once that kicked in, and then we started, we did a lot of touring, and mostly it was like really fun, really good adventure. Everybody got along generally really well. There's some lack of sleep times and stuff, but basically everything worked out. Nobody had any particular crazy problems, and I think our last tour was a 3-week tour starting in Ireland, and then we ended up in Belgium. And I was able to make my first, it's really hard to make jokes in a foreign language.
It's a dangerous territory to cross. Yes.
I said when we were in Belgium, I said, "Danke Duvel," which is a pun on the beer Duvel.
Yeah.
And Dank u wel is thank you very much in Dutch Belgian. And so I was able, and when I said Danke Duvel, everybody laughed.
Right. Nailed it.
To make a joke in a foreign language.
Yeah.
It was esoteric beer, but
So you kept, I like it a lot actually. You kept it short though. That's the key. Is you keep it
right. Comedy should be right to the point and then get the fuck off the stage.
Yeah, not everything should be the aristocrats, Yeah, and that's a good one. That's good. So there's a lot of it seems like there's a lot of awesome experiences, a lot of adventures, a lot of being able to literally take the band places that it didn't get to go before. Is there anything that you felt like Burma could have done that you wish it would have?
Not really. I mean, we were too peculiar to be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, but I suppose we could have been big in a, somewhere between Husker Du and Sonic Youth, which is in fact what we were, kind of somewhere between Husker Du and Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
We could have been big in some direction like that, but so what?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we had that second inexplicable experience in Round, where we actually could play, and every time we played, people got it and loved us instead of being confused and baffled.
Right,
I remember
exactly.
playing the first round. We played in Cleveland. We played Pirates Cove, I think. And we were walking down the street, and these girls came up to us and said, "God, we love Revolver." And it was like, we were pretty young, and they were, hot punk rock chicks.
Yeah.
And then we play the show, and the minute we start playing, people are just pinned against the wall. And by the third song, there's no response. It's dead air after every song. And I actually started taunting the audience, and nobody would move. And so that was the dichotomy. Like, we love this, and then we'd play, and then there would be this just chaos,
Yeah. It's unpredictable elements.
Yeah, it's just fucking weird. But so the reason I brought that up is the second round, the minute we started playing, people were right onto it. They knew all the songs. I'd play the opening chords to Red, which was nobody even knew back in the day, and cheers would go up, dun, dun, dun. And so the whole vibe was really different, and people were with us. And I remember my brother Ben sat in with saxophone with us in Brooklyn. He played on "Looking at You" by the MC5.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And he said, "I now know what it's like to be on stage with Mission of Burma." He'd played with us before, but this time was one of those nights where within 5 seconds you knew it was going to be a killer show because the vibe was just so strong.
Yeah, that's great.
It was really magical, and that hardly ever happened back in the day, in the first round.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it, but there's entire, people that never ever would have gotten to see you back when that like engage with the music and find something out of it. And they get to have the experience of, coming in in that informed way and engaging with it with a piece of art. And I think it's always to be celebrated personally. So.
Yeah, so it was a magical. We're all just incredibly grateful that people allowed us to make 4 more records and play for another 10 or 15.
Right.
Just kind of incredible.
How do you feel about doing the soundtrack works? I know you did a bunch of stuff that ended up at Sundance, and what was the big ideas for Small Planet, right? That was the
first one I did. The very first one I did, there was an animation house in Boston that I really liked called Olive Jar.
Mm-hmm.
And I like animation because there's nothing real about it. So I did, and there's no sound. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. There's no footsteps. There's no wind. There's no talking. Everything has to be recreated. So it's a fantasy world. So a footstep could be like 5 things dropping combined together,
Right.
And so I really enjoyed doing sound design for wacky animation. I did this MTV anti-violence PSA when that guy was shot. A black guy was pulled from a truck and shot in LA. Right.
Yeah.
91 or 93, whenever it was. I did the sound design for that. And I used the power tools and all this stuff. And that was my key in because I was good at that, like abstract sound. And then, unfortunately, that group, the animation house left, and I started doing normal soundtrack work where, you have to make music that's emotive for this, and it doesn't get in the way.
Right. We're trying to evoke this emotion here, but don't don't overdo it.
Right. But I mean, the films that I did that got into Sundance, they were left-leaning political stuff.
Yeah.
The first one was about the International Criminal Court. 2 of them were about the the genocide in Guatemala.
The Guatemala one, yeah, that was a heavy one, man.
That Ronald Reagan helped support, and so it's stuff that I can get behind. And even if the music, even if it's only rare that I can bring in what I consider my music to it, it's still my music, and but it's me adapting immensely to the film. So it's a different category, but you get paid for doing those kind of things. Soundtrack work, you really get paid for it. I can make music that I like, and I might not get paid.
Yeah, it's easier to make stuff kind of to order to a certain degree when that's a level of engagement.
People like the keyboard player from the band Magazine, he went on to do a lot of soundtrack work, and Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you make a living doing soundtrack work. You don't.
Sure.
Living as a touring rock musician is difficult.
Look at Trent Reznor and Atticus. I almost said Atticus Finch. That is from To Kill a Mockingbird. That is not who it is, but Atticus Ross.
Wait, you're right. That's confusing on occasion.
But he he's getting to the point where he was enjoying doing that more than taking his very large and well loved band out on the road, and was like, I get it. No, that's a different kind of reward, right?
Right. I mean, in some cases, when you're young, you like to go out, do crazy shit, and sleep on people's floor and get 2 hours nights of sleep, and have sex with people you'd have never met before 2 hours earlier. But when you get older, you don't do that as much because that's a young person's job. I personally still like going on the road. I don't sleep on people's floors and have sex with people that I don't know because I have somebody that I love that I live with. But I still like going out and playing shows.
Right, and traveling and taking these things to different places.
Yeah, and there's places that I know, and I know people there. And and I think Bob and Shellac is like that. They don't tour all the time. They have places they go, people they know, and it's like going back home. There's places I go, like the Milwaukee Film Festival. I played there 8 or 9 times, and I know the people, and I know the venues. This place has the Alpha King IPA on tap.
Right.
It's one of my favorite beers.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
This is a really good restaurant that we've been to 3 or 4 times. So you have these little homes around the world.
No, that's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the transmuting the prosaic, that modified vinyl with the turntables and the listening stations and all that. Can you tell me how that came to pass?
Yeah, I actually was showing that to somebody today. I could hold up a couple of the records if you want.
Yeah, if you look. Yes.
I apologize. I'm going to leave for about 45 seconds.
That's fine. I'll carry the show. So
keep talking.
We're here with Roger Miller. We're talking about transmuting the prosaic, which of course was it's a bunch of modified vinyl, works with listening stations. It's a whole deal. So we're gonna get a visual aid for this.
There we go. It's gonna take me a little bit to de-screw them.
Wow, this is quite the exclusive. I like it. This is quite the exclusive. I love it.
Transmuting the prosaic was my first art installation that I ever made, and it was in an art gallery, art museum in Brattleboro, Vermont, and also 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. This is a record. I got to hold it just right.
Nice.
It's the signal. Is it right side up? Yes. It's the lyric sheet from Signals, Calls, and Marches.
Oh, rad. That's awesome.
So now the lyrics from Signals, Calls, and Marches are now on the record. The lyrics that are on the record are now actually on the record.
I love that.
So it's most of this stuff is like that. It's kind of a conceptual, almost like Dada games. Here's a tone arm. There's a record, a tone arm on
a picture of a record that's on the record.
And so if you keep the tone arm, it was the exact same shape as the record player that this was sitting on.
Nice.
So there was that element to it. Oops. No, this one's harder to show.
Oh no, that's cool. That's so it looks like it's musical notation. Is that right?
It's 4 bars of a Bach fugue, which I can play on piano.
Nice.
The treble bass clef, 4 bars. But but when you put this on a record player with a needle, it's reduced to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It sounds like.
And the needle flies off the record.
Yeah.
So I would call that a Dada act.
Sure, absolutely.
And this is one that I like. It's always been one of my favorite images for years. It's in the 70s when television went off the air at midnight. That's
the off-air signal. Yeah,
the off-air signal. But then it says WRCM, so you're in the area of station Roger Clark Miller.
That's good. That's great because it does say WRCM. Yeah, so that makes sense, right? Yeah.
And that's kind of my logo on my website. Also, my excellent graphic designer Joanne Kalionsis.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
She laid that up for me. So those are the modified vinyl pieces, and each one of them came with a record that you would play.
Right.
So that like a little 7-inch with a turntable. So for the TV off sign, you'd put the needle down and you'd hear the national anthem, and then there'd be like a little bit of white. Let's see what happened. National anthem, then a sine tone, and then because this is what used to happen on the radio.
Yeah.
And then the sine tone was good for about 40 seconds, and then it would go off, and the rest of the 45, the next 4 minutes, would be white noise.
Right.
So I was recreating the experience. The one for signals, calls, and marches. That's all the lyrics that are on the album, but only if the words are used twice, I don't put them on twice.
Yeah. It's just that they're there. No, and that's funny because that's the music on the record, and there's the words on the record.
Yeah, but for the listening record, there was a listening record in front of you. Could look at this.
Yeah.
And the listening record, I edited from a digital copy of Signals, Calls, and Marches every word.
Oh, really? Okay.
The word "the" was in there about 12 times. I chose the one that sounded the best for the. I chose the best word for revolver, the best word for photograph, and I sunk them up in alphabetical order, just like this.
Right.
So
that's fantastic.
that made me really, really happy. So each of these things had an image like that, So and then I also, the other thing was the only movie I've ever made, which was Traffic in Davis Square, Somerville, which is a very specific cultural center in Somerville, Mass.
Uh-huh.
I filmed it in 4 different locations in 4 different seasons, and in each season has its own harmony. But I wrote a string score, an orchestral score, and when a car came by, the top of the car and the bottom note of the car, I would have the scale over here, and that whatever note it hit would be the 2 notes that would travel with the car.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so then that would be like, oh.
So when
wow.
there's just one car, you would hear this kind of simple 2-chord thing, and pedestrians walking up and down would be brass and woodwind. And so when there was lots of cars, you'd have this cacophony of string chords, and then as the cars moved, different chords would fade out and new ones would fade in, and it was very satisfying.
So what gave you the idea for these kinds of more conceptual art pieces? Is it just?
I think too much. Basically. I mean, the Davis Square Symphony, it was a beautiful May afternoon, sunny, and I was having a pint and having some food, just writing down notes, and I saw the cars go by, and I don't know what it was. I go, uh-oh, I can turn that into a score. And I had my camera, and I made a little movie, and I started analyzing it. It took a while for me to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
But it just suddenly I saw I could turn that into a score. Like
right.
I really like John Cage in the Accidental, and the Aleatoire.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and that's something you just get you going, right? It sets you off, and then next thing you know, it's the boulder rolling down the hill, so to speak.
I often find that an idea shows up, and if I can't get rid of it, I have to follow it.
Right. No, that's cool. I mean, it's neat being able to see it because obviously I did not see the actual. I saw some like pictures of the event, but reading the prosaic, it's like I'm not going to be able to like see the records up close, because I wasn't in the region that it was happening, let alone the city it was happening.
Indeed.
How do you feel about like chamber music and things along those lines? Because I feel like you've had some compositions, right, that have been played over the years in different places. that's the true like composer's journey, right? Of like, wow, now these people are going to be playing this music, and I'm not even, it's not even me on the guitar with like the pedals and everything.
I mean, I was a composition major at Cal Arts, and in the mid '70s when I lost interest in rock music before punk rock brought it back, and I was, written out compositions.
Yeah.
And I started doing that again in 2009, somewhat inspired by my brother Ben's work with the saxophone orchestra. And I wrote this piece, and then Stephen Drury, who works at the New England Conservatory, he leads a new music ensemble, and someone suggested that, and this just kills me to this day. Anyways, he reached out to me and had that piece performed there, and then since then I've had I've had 3 different pieces performed at NEC. The one that really did it was a piece called Vines for Music, where I took a photograph of vines on my garage wall,
Cool.
residue of vines, like the little suction cups where the thing is attached, and then the few little stalks.
Sure.
And then I set a grid up of 7 octaves, and I had 3 piano players at one completely prepared piano,
Right.
following the grid of the suction cups, and then the vine residue were strings. So there's 5 string players. The cello.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
And when it was performed at this new music festival at the New England Conservatory, and I'm sitting there like, I can't believe I'm playing this, because I mean I love it, of course. And when it was done, I was freaked out. The audience response was so intense, and the people that I cared about the most, Steve Drury, the head of the new music department, a cello player who's just brilliant, he now works for the Australian Symphony, and the chair of the string department at Berkeley, all came up to me as I was sitting there kind of dumbfounded. And while the applause was going, he came up to me and said, "That was amazing." And as I left, that night I had another show to play. As I left, 2 groups of 20-somethings came up to me in the same way that that people come up to me after Burma shows, except for it was for my music for strings and prepared piano that had no rhythm, had no pulse,
Right.
had no harmony, had no concert pitch. And it was the same thing. They were just like, it was like a Burma thing. They were like freaked out that they were actually able to talk to me.
That's fantastic. And that's got to be a totally different vibe than like rock show engagement,
completely,
right?
completely. And I'm going, I go, there's something here that I should keep doing. If this is the reaction I'm getting.
Yeah. Well, and why not? I mean, that's not something that is dependent on youth.
Right. But here they were like 20, they were the same age as the people at Burma shows, some years earlier.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I can sit at home and I don't have to tour, and I can compose, and I'm still doing that stuff.
No, that's exciting, man. That's super cool, and I'm glad that you've like it's not that it feels like you haven't even slowed down as far as from an outside perspective. I feel like there's always something kind of new and cool and exciting that you got cooking.
Yeah. It does seem like that. I mean, I just keep going. It's like I don't know why. As long as I have the ideas that show up, I'll keep doing them.
Well, that's a perfect segue as any to sort of round this out. It's been
it's been a longer talk than I anticipated.
They go pretty deep. I sometimes don't exactly mention the times because it sounds daunting, but then you do it. And it's like, oh yeah, there we go. Last thing, Roger Miller, thank you so much, by the way. But last thing, this is the only canned question that I ever ask folks, and you can choose to interpret this however you like.
I will.
But why do you do what you do?
I can't help it. It seems like something that, now I have to do this. I mean, I don't go, what should I do? It's more like, now I have to do this. It's like I'm compelled to do it. And it's not out of ego. It's out of, I see something that can be done that won't get done any other way, other than me doing it. And so therefore I'm obligated to do it. That's the answer.
Love it. Roger Clark Miller, thank you so much, man. It's been great having you.
Mr. Neutron. I will say that your name reminds me of the name Sproton Layer for some reason.
Sure. Yeah.
Neutron, protons, proton. It all kind of blends together.
Protons and Electrons is the name of a compilation record we did of 7-inch singles. So it's protons, electrons, and neutrons make the atom. So there you go.
There we go. That's
Take care. I might just see you at the Milwaukee Film Festival now that I know that you're
that'd be
doing it.
amazing. Yeah, definitely. I'm at the merch table. I'm the guy who handles merch.
There you go. All right. Well, don't
Okay.
threaten me with a good time. I'll bring some cash. Take care, brother.
All right. Thanks very much.
All right. There he goes. Roger Clark Miller. What an awesome dude. Let's play it out with the song. I think I gotta go photograph, right? I'm gonna go photograph. Please follow Roger Miller on all of the things that you follow people on, because that is what we do now. And yeah, this is not a photograph. Here we go. There you go. This is not a photograph. This is not a photograph by Mission of Burma. That was one of many great tunes by my guest, Roger Clark Miller of Mission of Burma, and Alloy Orchestra, or Anvil Orchestra if you're Roger Ebert, apparently. But that's also a thing. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought that was great. Please follow Roger on all the many social media things. And I guess if you're listening live, Milwaukee Film Festival. Otherwise, it probably already happened. But I'm sure there's something else cool coming up with Roger Miller very soon. Name of this show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so very much for listening to it. This show airs usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Streaming live on YouTube and Twitch. Podcasted later everywhere. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you like it and you want to help it survive and get episodes sooner, you can do that at $1 a month at patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. Advance access. Thanks to everyone for liking, subscribing on your platform of choice, sharing the episodes around. All that helps people find the show.
And Mrs. America, all the ships at sea.
And it's a darn nice thing to do. Really.
Anyone within the sound of my voice.
Lots of I don't even know what's happening next. Oh, Danbert Nobicon of Chumbawamba this week. And then Donnie Blair of Toadies next week as well as some other surprises.
Ionize the air.
10th anniversary show on the 25th of April. Tune in for that.
This microphone
And as always,
sound into electricity.
thanks everyone for listening. I always appreciate you. Stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now?
And check you later.
Out on Route 128, dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See in the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio